Today we're talking about God's plan. God actually left a plan in the book of Genesis that we can follow out to the T. We can see how God strategically placed the plan into action. We're going to look at a story. It's a familiar Bible story and it's a familiar Bible character. And if you know the story of Joseph, that's whose life we're looking at today. But it's not just Joseph's life that was affected by Joseph's story. It was the life of the 12 tribes of Israel. All of Joseph's brothers were involved in this story. If you're ready, let's go. God's strategic plan starts when Abraham's name was still Abram. God told Abram to leave his family and go to the land that he was going to show him. And into the land of Canaan he went. Canaan was the promised land. When Abram arrived in the promised land, God told him to look to the north, the south, the east, and the west. And every place Abram looked, God was going to give to Abram and his descendants for an inheritance forever. God told Abram that his generations following him, that he would be their God. All of Abram's descendants, God would be their God. They could call on God and he would answer them. God also warned Abram that his people were going to be strangers in a foreign land. And he said, know for sure that your people will be strangers in a foreign land and they will be slaves for 400 years. But after their bondage, after they've done the 400 years, God was going to deliver them with a great deliverance and they were going to come out with riches. Now let's look at God's timing. Well, when did this happen? God told Abram that it wouldn't happen during his lifetime, that he would go down to the grave and he'll have peace. He'll go down to the grave without this ever happening. But he said that it would happen after Abram's death. So when did it happen? It happened at just the right time. God needed just the right man for the job. God needed Joseph. Joseph was the love child of Jacob's second wife, which was the wife of Jacob's choice. Jacob loved Rachel, that was her name. And her sister Leah was Jacob's first wife. That's a very long story and we're not going to get into that. But Joseph was the love child and he was Jacob's favorite son. He loved him so much that he gave him a coat of many colors, and that coat stood out from a distance. From a distance you could see that multicolored coat, and that's exactly what happened. When Joseph was about 17 years old, he had a dream. He dreamed that 11 stars would bow down before him. He dreamed that the 11 brothers he had would bow before him, that he would be in charge somehow and they would come and bow before him. He also dreamed that his father and mother would also come and bow before him. Now, as Joseph dreamed the dream and had the coat of many colors, and he would also work with his half-brothers, and he would tell on them. So he was a tattletale. He was a snitch. He would tell on them and he would get them in trouble, and their father would fuss at them or discipline them, all because of Joseph. So because Joseph was a snitch and because Joseph was the favorite of his father Jacob, even though he was the 11th son, because he was the favorite, because he was a snitch, his brothers just didn't like him. They actually hated him. They really did. So the brothers were off one day and they were working, and Joseph comes and they could see Joseph a far way off, and the brother says, oh, here he comes. He said, you know, I really don't like him. I really just hate him. Why don't we just kill him? Why don't we just get rid of him? Now Reuben heard them talking. Reuben was the oldest son, and he said, well, no, let's not kill him. There's a pit over here. Why don't we just put him in the pit? And in the back of Reuben's mind, Reuben's thinking, okay, we'll put him in the pit, and then later on, I'll go back and rescue Joseph. Because I don't want to kill him, and I don't want to leave him in the pit. How am I going to explain this to my dad? Because I'm the oldest son. So they decided to put Joseph in a pit. Joseph was literally placed in a pit. He was down spiritually. He was down emotionally. He was down physically. He was down in a dark hole. And he's crying out to his brothers for help and mercy and pity. And he's crying and he's upset. And they have no mercy. They like turn a deaf ear to his cry. They hear the anguish of his soul and they have no pity. So have you ever been in a spot where you have just been abused or misused, or you've just been neglected, or you've been hurt, and no one seemed to have any mercy or pity for you? They kept talking and they said, you know what, I really do want to kill him. And Judah came to Joseph's defense. He said, no, don't kill him. Look, here comes some Ishmaelites, and why don't we trade him? Why don't we sell him to the Ishmaelites? At least we can get some money. Let's get some money for him, and then he can be on his way. And they can do with him whatever they want to do. Don't let that blood be on our hands. Let it be on theirs. Whatever happens to Joseph after this is on them. So they decided to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. And they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. There were 10 of them. They would get 2 silver coins apiece. And that's exactly what they decided to do. They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. What happened to you in your life? We all have life stories. We all go through things. But here's the point of this story. Joseph was down physically, emotionally, spiritually. He was down. But the Bible says the Lord was with Joseph. That makes all the difference. When God is with us and when God is on our side. No matter what we go through, the Lord is with us. He sees what's happening to us, but he still has a plan and a purpose for all of that. Joseph can look at his life and he could see how he was abused, and he could see how he was alone, and he could see how there was no one there for him. He was away from his family. He was separated. He was lonely. I'm sure he had many nights that he cried. But God was with Joseph, and God still had a plan for Joseph. Joseph had to be retrained. Have you ever been in a spot in your life where maybe you've had a job and you've worked for this job many years and you become an expert in that job, and then one day it's over? The job is no longer there for you. It may not even exist anymore with the way technology is today. Technology has taken many jobs. So maybe you find yourself in a point where you have to be retrained. You have to learn new skills, new talents, new abilities, because your life has changed forever. It's no longer the way it used to be. Everything has changed. You're in unfamiliar territory. And this is exactly what happened to Joseph. But remember, just like Joseph, God is with you. Now, as Joseph lived in Egypt, he had several jobs. He was a housekeeper and manager for Potiphar, who was one of Pharaoh's men. He was accused, actually, of trying to have sex with his wife. His wife saw Joseph. Joseph was a handsome man. He was young, and he was strong, and he was good looking. And every day he would go to Potiphar's house and work. He would manage his books and take care of the house. And Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph, and she said, "Ooh, that's a good looking man." And she approached him to have sex with her. Joseph said, "No, I can't do that. I fear God. And that's disrespectful to Potiphar. He's trusted me with everything in his house except you. I'm not doing that." Day in and day out, she would approach Joseph for sex, and he would say no. So one day she really got aggressive and she approached him and he said, "No, lady, get off me." And he left his coat. Actually, she pulled the coat off. And he ran out of the house. And when she saw that she had his coat in her hands, she started screaming, "Help, help, help! He's trying to rape me! He's trying to rape me!" So when Potiphar came home, she told Potiphar that story. And Potiphar threw Joseph in jail. Have you ever been wrongly accused? Has someone lied on you and it caused harm and suffering to you? Maybe you even went to jail because somebody lied on you. They said it was you and it wasn't you. Mistaken identity, or just lies. Just someone out to get you. They didn't like you and they just lied on you, and you end up in a place because of lies. This is what happened to Joseph. He goes to jail. Now while he's in jail, the Lord is with Joseph. God is always with Joseph, no matter what Joseph goes through, just like with you. The Lord is with you right where you are right now. God is there and he's working things out. Now as Joseph is in jail, he meets two of Pharaoh's workers. They're there because Pharaoh has thrown them in for one reason or another. One is a baker and the other one is like a cup holder. He holds the cup for Pharaoh. Now Joseph, during this time, I told you he had to be retrained. So Joseph had to learn the Egyptian language. He had to learn their customs and their manners, because he didn't know that. He was a Hebrew, came from Canaan, another land, speaking another language. So he comes to Egypt and he had to be retrained. So as he's talking to these people in jail, now I have to remind you, I have to tell you, while Joseph was in jail, God was with Joseph, and God raised Joseph up so that the jailer started to trust Joseph. And they really didn't worry about anything because Joseph was in charge and Joseph took care of them. So there are some men in jail and they have dreams. And God apparently has been speaking to Joseph through dreams. God has given Joseph the gift of interpretation of dreams. The two men from Pharaoh's court had dreams, and Joseph interpreted the dream. The first one he interpreted favorably. He says, okay, it means that in 3 days, you are going to be restored. Pharaoh is going to call you back and you're going to serve Pharaoh with the wine cup again. You're going to be in his employment again. The baker also had a dream, and it involved 3 days. And Joseph interpreted his dream. He says, yes, in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to hang you. And just like Joseph said, in 3 days, the wine taster, the cupbearer, he was restored to his position. And in 3 days, the baker's head was removed. He was hanged. After Joseph interpreted the dream for the wine taster, the cup holder, he told him, man, when you restore to Pharaoh's court, don't forget about me. Mention me to Pharaoh. Put in a good word for me, because I don't like being down here. Just mention my name to Pharaoh. Well, the wine taster was restored, and he literally forgot about Joseph. He was in that position for 2 years. 2 years had passed, and no mention of Joseph to Pharaoh. Well, Pharaoh had a dream. Pharaoh's dream was about the future. And he called his people in and he says, I need somebody to interpret this dream for me. And nobody was able to interpret it. So the cupbearer, he says, oh, I know a man. He interpreted my dream for me, and now I'm restored to my position. He can help you. And so Pharaoh summoned Joseph. And Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. And Joseph says, I know God, and he is the interpreter of dreams. God will tell me what your dream means. So God told Joseph the meaning of Pharaoh's dream. The meaning of the dream was there was going to be a famine in the land, but there was going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of lack. And because Joseph interpreted this dream for Pharaoh, Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of everything. He says, God is giving you this information. You are the best man for the job. And so now Joseph is elevated in position. He has gone from in the pit to Egypt in the dungeon, and now he is second in command of Egypt, only second to Pharaoh. God is a God of timing. When Joseph had his dream, he was about 17 years old, and the Bible says shortly after that, he was sold into slavery. Now, he has been in Egypt, and Pharaoh has a dream, and Joseph is 30 years old. So Joseph has been in Egypt about 13 years. Now, in the land of Canaan, Joseph's hometown, there was a famine. And the famine was so bad that his brothers had to leave their homeland and travel all the way to Egypt to get food, because there was a rumor there was food in Egypt. So they come to Egypt to buy food. Now, as they're coming, they have to come to Joseph because he's in charge of food distribution. As they're coming, Joseph looks out and he sees them and he recognizes them. Now, have you ever been in that situation, or what do you think you would do if you were in that situation? Situation where your abuser, your accuser, the people who wished you were dead, people who just harmed you, who wanted to do bad things to you, or maybe did bad things to you, now they're coming to you because they need your help. How do you respond to that? Do you help them, or do you get even and seek revenge and get even with them for the way they treated you? So there's no way you're going to help them because they did not help you. Joseph, what do you think he felt? What is that like? You look out and you see your brothers coming. I'm sure you have mixed emotions. You miss them, but you're mad at them. You love them, but you hate them, all at the same time. How do you deal with that? Well, Joseph dealt with it by giving them food, but giving them a lot of questions. He asked about their father. Now, Joseph was smart. He looked like an Egyptian because he had been in Egypt so long. He talked like an Egyptian, and he used an interpreter to speak to his brothers. So his brothers didn't know that he understood their language. So the brothers are talking as Joseph is really grilling them, asking about his family and his father and calling them spies. He actually accused them, oh, you're spies. I don't believe you came here just to buy some food. You came to spy out the land because you're spies. I don't trust you. And they said, no, we're not spies. We're sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. And we have a brother, a younger brother, who's our father's heart. And he's the son of his old age. And so Joseph says, I still don't believe you. You're spies. So the brothers are nervous and they're upset, and they actually bow before Joseph. Joseph's dream has just come true. His 10 brothers are actually bowing before him. The 10 that sold him into slavery, the 10 that put him in the pit, have now come to him asking him for help. What do you think Joseph did? He took all of the brothers and threw them in jail. I'm sure he was just trying to decide how to handle this. Out of nowhere, here they come, presenting themselves to him for help. What do you think you would do? Would you help them, or would you hurt them? Joseph put them in jail, and after 3 days, he sent for them to appear before him again. And so Joseph says, okay, this is how I'm going to prove that you all are not spies. I'm going to send 9 of you home, but I'm going to keep 1 of you. Now, the brothers had been talking, and they didn't know that Joseph understood their language. And so Joseph had been speaking through an interpreter, but he understood every word they said. And they said, all of this is happening to us because of what we did to Joseph. God is punishing us. He's just punishing us. And now, when Reuben said, look, I told y'all not to bother that boy. I told you to leave him alone. And Reuben, it was the oldest son, he's saying that, and Joseph is hearing it. So Joseph decides to send 9 brothers home, but he picks Simeon to stay. And I'm wondering if he picked Simeon to stay because Simeon was the second born, the second oldest, and he should have known better than to send Joseph into the pit. So Joseph is starting to get even. He tells the brothers, go home. But when you come back here, you make sure you bring your youngest brother, because if you don't bring him, then I'll know you're liars and I know you're spies. When the boys return home to their father Jacob, they tell him of their encounter with this Egyptian ruler. And they told their father, we can't go back for any more food without taking Benjamin with us. And Judah even said, Dad, I know that Joseph is gone and Simeon is still in Egypt, so 2 of your sons are gone. But we have to take Benjamin if we're going to get food for the rest of the family. Now you can take my sons. If I don't bring Benjamin back, then you can kill my sons. But we got to take Benjamin back, or the Egyptian ruler is not even going to see us. And he'll accuse us of being spies and liars. So Jacob said, you know what, if you take my son and he doesn't come back, you're going to send my old gray-haired self down to the grave in pity and sorrow. I'm just going to be a broken man and I'm just going to die. And he said, Dad, we're going to bring him back. And if I don't, then do what you have to my sons. So the boys go back to Egypt, and Joseph sees them again, and this time he spots Benjamin, his younger brother, his brother from the same mother. Now the other brothers are half-brothers. They have the same dad, but they have 3 different moms. So Joseph sees Benjamin, and he's excited, and his heart just melts seeing his younger brother. He's just overcome with joy. Now Joseph invites his brothers to lunch. He says, okay, prepare a meal and bring them to my palace, because I want to have lunch with these boys. Now when they heard that they were going to Joseph's palace, they started sweating. They were sweating bullets. They said, oh gosh, what have we done now? What is he going to do to us? We just don't trust him. Now we brought all these gifts because Jacob, their father, says, well, take all these gifts to this Egyptian rulers. And so they prepared the gifts and they presented it to Joseph at lunch. And they were hoping that everything would be okay. And they're just explaining themselves all over the place, just talking and trying to make things okay. And Joseph's servants are saying, you know, be cool. It's okay. It's all right. Just relax. So Joseph comes home and he's sitting at the table with his brothers. And Joseph puts his brothers at the table in order, from the oldest to the youngest. And the brothers are looking at each other saying, what in the world is going on? And they even go get Simeon, and Simeon is sitting at the table with them. So Joseph and the brothers enjoy a meal. After the meal, Joseph packed up his brothers again, and he was going to send them home, but he had a plan to keep his brother Benjamin with him. So his plan was to send the brothers off, put all their monies back in their sack, and then fill Benjamin's sack with his silver cup. And he put the silver cup and money in Benjamin's sack. And the brothers went on their way. They were happy to be leaving. They said, we've had a good time in Egypt, and now we're on our way back home. But again, Joseph sent his men after the brothers. And when they came upon the brothers said, well, what's going on? The men said, you all are thieves. Someone has taken the silver cup. And they said, we're not thieves. No one took the silver cup. And if you find that silver cup among any of our things, the man whose bag you find it in, or whose possession you find that cup in, he can be killed, and we'll be your slaves. And so they found the cup in Benjamin's sack. And they tore their clothes. All of those brothers just tore their clothes because they were so angry and upset and frustrated, because they knew how much their dad loved their brother Benjamin, how he was the son of his old age, his baby boy. And now he was going to be no more. They had gotten rid of Joseph, and now Benjamin is going to be stuck in Egypt or killed because of them. They just couldn't bear it. So Joseph's men rounded them all up and sent them back to appear before Joseph. Now as they get there, they're talking, and Judah starts to talk to Joseph. He says, you know, may I just approach you? May I just talk to you a little bit? So he starts talking to Joseph. He says, you know, our dad is old, and my father, he's already lost a son. And if you take this son, our father is just going to die. And Joseph just started to cry. But he didn't cry in front of them. He said, I got to get out of here. I got to find a place where I can just release. I got to go because this is too much. It's just overwhelming. And Joseph left. It's been a long time coming. But today's text comes from Genesis 45 verses 1 through 8. And it reads like this. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made known himself unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Does my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve your posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Something happened to Joseph. As he was listening to that story from Judah, and just his heart was just wrenching. You know, he was just remembering the pain and the agony and the anguish that he suffered at the hands of these men. But then he was remembering God, and God apparently had been working on Joseph and his heart. God had been working on Joseph and forgiving his brothers. God had been giving Joseph some counseling sessions because you know Joseph needed them. He needed to understand that he was in his place of purpose. And the reason he's in his place of purpose is because of the way God sent him to Egypt. He says it himself in the scriptures. He says, don't be upset, brothers, because of your doing, because you put me in the pit, because it was actually God who sent me here ahead of you. God sent me here, and I'm in my place of purpose. This is what my life was meant to be. I was meant to work here. I was meant to be in Egypt. I was meant to be the governor and in charge of food distribution, to keep you alive and to keep generations after you alive. That was God's purpose for me. But I didn't know that I was going to have to go through being put in a pit. When I had that dream, I enjoyed the dream. I enjoyed the thought of my brothers bowing before me. I enjoyed that. But I didn't enjoy being put in a pit. I didn't enjoy being sold into slavery. I didn't enjoy being accused of trying to rape a woman. I didn't enjoy being put in prison. I didn't enjoy those things. But God used every one of those things to shape and make and mold me. And God did that so that I could stand here before you and offer food distribution to you to keep you alive. Because God is a God of his word. He is a God of promise. He promised Abraham that he would keep his descendants. He promised Abraham that he would be the God of his descendants. He promised Abraham that he would take those people back to the land of Canaan, into the land of promise. And he also warned Abraham that his people would be prisoners and slaves They would be slaves for 400 years in a land that was foreign to them. And this was the foreign land. This was the land of Egypt. This is where the generations of Abraham and Israel started to grow and multiply in Egypt. And then this is how Moses later came along and delivered the children of Israel. But this is their beginning. This is how they got to Egypt. They came from the promised land to Egypt so that God could deliver them with a great deliverance. This story of Joseph is just not about Joseph. It's about Joseph and his brothers and the purpose and plan and destiny that God has for them. You see, his brothers are not evil half-brothers. They are actually, together with Joseph, the 12 tribes of Israel. Their father Jacob's name was changed to Israel. So these are Israel's boys. These are the guys whose names will be written on the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem that's mentioned in Revelations. These are men of promise. And so this story tells us that God has purpose and destiny for all of us, whether we're the perpetrators or we're the victims, because nothing happens to us that God doesn't know about. And God is with us. No matter what situation we go through, God is there with us, and God is for us, and God has a way of working things out. God has a way of turning things around. God has a way of maneuvering things in our life to get us to the spot that He wants us to end up in. God is a God of destiny. He's a God of purpose. And He has your purpose and your life in His hands. And He is more than able and willing and capable to bring you to the spot that He designed you to be in. So believe God. And if you like this video, remember to subscribe and hit the like button. I'm Alice Newsome, and I thank you so much for watching.